So don't back off from the way. Yeah, we're just slowing down. Yeah, we're just slowing down. Just slowing down.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of The New Unfiltered. Before I get into this episode, I want to encourage any of you who live on the East Coast to check out where we are filming, which is called Metro Podcasts in New York City. Head to the show notes if you want to book your own studio space here. I have filmed all my podcasts this week here, and I just love it. So a few years ago, maybe like a year and a half, I got really into reading, which is weird because I feel like it was very delayed in life for me that I all of a sudden had this epiphany that I wanted to read literally a book a week. And that's a very expensive habit if you are a Barnes & Noble fan. So I got a library card when I was in Austin, and then anytime I'm visiting my parents, I'll go to the library there. And a few months ago, I was at the library, and anytime I am near a library, I'll pick up about 5 books. I like to read between 3 to 5 a month, and I do it in the morning. I do it before I go to bed. It's really become part of my routine, and I find as an entrepreneur just really important to read. And I also very much like hard copies of books. I've never read anything online or on a Kindle or anything unless it was some form of a news article. So one of the books I picked up was called Reply All. Now, I work for myself and I have my own business, so I've never worked in or had to go through that traditional job trajectory aside from when I was at Disney. So as I started reading this book, I was like, wow, I wish I had these tips prior to me, even though I had my own show, but working for this large corporation. And so I was very intrigued by who was so easily writing about these topics that can be taken very seriously, from job interviews and what to wear and how to even respond on an email. And so I've got the author of one of my favorite books here, Reply All, Richie Frieman, in the studio today.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And real quick, a side note, when you mentioned about you not being a really good reader, that was, my literary career, I've had 8 books already, and I was an awful reader growing up. I didn't read my first book until I graduated, until my senior year of college. And that's the truth. Cover to cover. And now, of course, I love it, but people always find that odd, and I talk to kids about that too, because I grew up, I could hardly, the words back then just were not making sense to me, and the way I saw things and the way I absorbed things. So then when I became a writer, people kind of looked, and I tell that story, they assumed I was just like an A+ English student all year round. I can tell you right now, I was definitely not an A+ English student, so.
Did you ever like writing though when you were younger?
Oh yeah, I always loved art, and art was always something I loved. I could draw, I drew all the time, and painting as I got older, still did that. And I was never a bad student, but I definitely was a skimmer. I tried to piece it together. My grades basically showed that, but really not until I got to college I really started enjoying it. But I really until my senior year of college, and I read my first book cover to cover, and ever since then I've had it. But I've always enjoyed storytelling and art and putting those together.
I think I was tainted from being I remember middle and high school and being almost forced to read books I didn't like. I loved Ruby Holler. That was the one book I remember really liking. But as I slowly started, like I said, going to the bookstore and the library and finding books on my own, I realized that reading people's personal memoirs or experience in business as an entrepreneur and as a founder was making my business and me such a better person. And what I really appreciate about Reply All is you talk about etiquette. And how do you explain, when people think about etiquette, I think they may even think about girls who have to go to cotillion and they have to wear certain dresses and all of that. And the way that you portrayed etiquette in this book, and it's so cool to meet you in person, because I couldn't figure out what kind of person would write this kind of book, but it was just such an easy, fun but serious read. So what do you think about etiquette? What made you want to write this kind of a book?
So this is years ago. We're actually celebrating the 10th anniversary. Just celebrated the 10th anniversary of this book. So it's meant the world to me. It took my career to another level. It opened up eyes to different opportunities, and I'm very, I love what St. Martin's Press, Macmillan Publishing had done for me. But I had been writing a blog and podcast years ago called Modern Manners Guy. And it was basically a humorous take on manners and etiquette, not the cotillion, the hoity-toity. That's not my thing. Now, I believe in dressing well and presenting well and acting normal at a dinner table, but it was more about the annoying things you see, coworkers, or, you just talked about, being in line for coffee and the person's like on their phone the whole time, whether line back there waiting to order, kind of like that Seinfeld, Larry David approach towards etiquette. And that's what I thought was more relatable. And there's a lot of things that as a young person, you stumble into these faux pas and you stumble into accidents, and then you're like, feel like everything is like, the world's over now. And when I was writing for a Modern Manners guy, every episode was a different topic, 3 ways to handle blank, most annoying this. And it all really kind of came together, and we realized that a lot of the young people, young professionals need this across the table view of what life is really like. And I didn't want to be just me preaching and talking about ideas and things like that. Was not it. So in the book, every chapter is somebody, a famous, either it's a celebrity or a very successful entrepreneur and CEO that talks about different aspects of business etiquette and how you can really see it from a young person's eyes into a professional.
Do you know The Points Guy?
The Points Guy?
It's like the biggest travel blog out there. But
the guy who where you shows you how to use all your points?
Yes.
Yeah.
You were like the etiquette guy. Like what the Points Guy is to travel, you are to manners and etiquette.
Oh, that's an honor. I take that.
Well,
yes.
I think it's super cool because I don't even ever remember learning about etiquette. And I'll give you an example. My sister, she's very different than me, but she has always been with very wealthy men. They are naturally gravitate towards her. I don't know why, but it's awesome. That being said, I was always around anyone she was like dating or when she got married and whatnot, and I didn't grow up like that, right? Like we have a mom who is very normal and just super normal. Mm-hmm. And I remember she was always yelling at me like, you don't do this, you don't have coffee. And I now anytime I'm very cautious of things like that because I understand how it can be perceived. But more importantly, I was never taught how to have manners. Yeah. My parents never taught me that. And I know you have kids, right?
Yes, I have 2 kids. Yeah.
Yeah,
15 and 11.
And that's a great age.
Yeah, I know.
But like, what does it even mean to have manners? That's
a good question. So, and it's funny. I mean, I definitely didn't grow up in a very, again, that white gloved hoity-toity environment at all. Mm-hmm. 2 working parents. My dad's been in sales his whole life. My mom was a wedding planner. So I did get a lot of stuff on the back end from her. I mean, she's done weddings and events and stuff like that. But, my dad being in business and things, I remember when I was like, when I was going to like bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs when I was in middle school, we would make sure my tie was really on point, and I had a suit, and you would iron my shirts to a crease. And that was like teach you how to like present yourself. But it's as you get into the workforce, you witness things and you're like, oh man, is that really like that person's really doing that? Or I really don't like that part, but you don't know really how to say or react. And at the end of the day, manners, I look at manners overall is how you treat people and how people react to you. And in the book, I open up with the worst job experience I've had in my entire life with this boss I had who was just a monster and a bully. And I was like, I would never even think about doing some of the things that he said or would do. And then you start to like categorize things like, oh, I would never want somebody to do that. And so, being a parent, I have my kids and look, I'm never gonna say like, oh, go watch. You see Alexa over there? Do not be Alexa. It's not like that, but it's more like, we point things, I'm like, well, did you see how, they were talking back to their parents like that? Or do you see how, they yelled back at the coach? Or, you don't answer your phone when you're at the dinner table with so-and-so. And like, there's certain little things like that. It's not about being uptight and back straight. Like, those things are, you got to figure on your own. But it's more about just that presentation and respect factor across the board.
I would like to ask you, though, when you say about even something like sitting up straight, right? Yeah. When you're interviewing someone or when you're talking to someone and the way that they present themselves, for example, if I was here right now in sweatpants instead of a skirt, and I would like you to be transparent about this because I will for sure say I would judge someone 100% based on that. That's your first impression. I mean, how do you create a strong first impression, and does it come with your appearance first?
Yeah, I think so. I think it absolutely does. And I mean, the appearance is a key part. I mean, and that doesn't mean you have to like have the most expensive clothes in the world.
No.
I mean, it's just a matter of just putting it together and taking
the
time with it. I think this, like, do you remember back in the day when like Zuckerberg came out and it was this whole like hoodies and I mean, you're an entrepreneur and CEO. You've seen all the Silicon Valley hustlers and stuff like that, where it's like, it's almost like this cool thing to be like sloppy or just like, I don't need to care about it. That to me is just, that was a phase. And everybody tried to follow it when it was hot, and then you realize it's just not happening. it is about presenting yourself because, even if the person knows who you are, it's just a respect thing that I think you have to take care of yourself and put it forward. And again, it does not mean about just having expensive things and trying to flash a watch or a necklace or stuff like that. It's just about, when somebody wants to show up for you, you have to show up for them as well. If you go to a meeting with somebody, know your audience. Look, if the person is a sweatpants person, okay, I get it. That's totally cool. I mean, maybe just wear jeans or something like that. You always want to be like a little bit step above that. So that's kind of the rule I follow. But I've always decided to be rather overdressed than underdressed.
Yeah.
It's a bit easier. But it's really about just how you present yourself and carry it. Because people make their minds up about someone within the first few seconds. I mean, you do it in relationships. Yep. I mean, you do it with dating, you do it at work, you do it in meetings, all this kind of stuff. So it's really that first thing, and then the person has to win you back if you already don't enjoy how they came storming in, threw their stuff down, started complaining about something out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, wait, oh, nice to meet you. Hi, thanks. Stuff like that. So that's how I look at it and really try to put myself in their shoes, and hopefully they would be respectful of that, interaction.
Yeah, and you talk about a lot of like personal stories as well as people you've also interviewed in this, and I really appreciated reading what other people thought as well about manners and etiquette. But it's funny you bring up these startup bros and whatnot, because we even look at like Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg and even like Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos and like the black turtleneck and this, and it's just this like 4 same shirts and I don't know if that necessarily makes people judge them less, but I think in their minds, like if they were to be super simple like that, then it gives people less of a reason to judge them. Is that kind of why you think?
Well, I think that, that's a good point. And I think that, look, if you're Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg, you can honestly wear whatever the hell you want to wear, and it's okay.
But why? Just because you're rich? Or
well, not because you're rich, but because, one, I think it is, in the beginning, like if you read stuff about Jobs, he was saying like, it was one less thing he had to worry about. He wore the same stuff every day. Fine. Now, I'm pretty sure his stuff was really nice. He had so much stuff. And soon it becomes your gimmick and your shtick. And I think a lot of it is shtick and gimmick. Same thing with Zuckerberg, wearing the hoodie stuff. Like, he wore the hoodie because I don't think he really ever had to work anywhere. And he was young, and that's what you wear. And then it became a trend. It caught on. So I don't personally think of that. I mean, I think that, and then when it also sets a stage for how other people work in the office. And even if you have like a casual office where people can wear, you can say, hey, look, you wear jeans and a shirt, that's fine. But I mean, you're still not going to show up like a slob.
No.
And I don't think that the owner of that company, if it's a jeans and t-shirt kind of vibe, which is totally fine, should be in a jeans and a t-shirt all the time. Unless you're selling like retro t-shirts or something like that, I have no idea. But it's like, there is that level up. I don't know if it's because they don't feel like they have to. I think that they just I think it builds into a bit of a gimmick. Also with that air of just, I feel comfortable where I am and this helps me work better, I guess.
Okay, so what does let's think of a 22-year-old woman and then a 22-year-old male. Yeah. What do they wear to a job interview?
Suit.
Their first.
100% suit. There is no, for male or female, you got to wear a suit. I mean, that just is the way it is. It doesn't matter. Now, it can be, a woman can wear, suit pants and a blazer or a top, and then same thing with the guys. There is really no excuse not to for the job interview. And if they say, look, I've met with people in there and I was wearing like a tie, and they said, look, next time you come, you don't have to wear a tie. We just wear more button-down shirts. I'm like, all right, cool. Now I know.
Yeah.
But to me, it looks like you almost look, and I talk about this in the book too, you look unprepared purposely. Like you knew you had this job interview. You knew you had this meeting, but you decide to just not take full care of it. And that goes along showing up late, which is another crazy one too. But I think that you always have to dress as if, obviously the person's a stranger, but really that you're going to represent to them. That's what it all comes down to. I mean, you got to make sure they think that you're going to represent them out of the office.
Yeah. And look, I love a good pair of sweatpants. I think I have different pairs of sweatpants. Like I have, my casual Saturday sweatpants, and then I have like cashmere sweatpants that I think are really cool with sneakers. I think a lot of young people think that they either need to like look 100% or, try and maintain this like super chill vibe. And I think there's a very easy combo and way to do it. Like a nice pair of jeans and like a blazer if you're a girl, right? Or a pair of sneakers or a small heel. And you want to have your own kind of vibe to it. I mean, when you were growing up, how soon did you become confident in yourself to know exactly what like your style was and your aesthetic to be the most mannered person and well-positioned person in the room.
Well, I mean, look, growing up, I definitely did not. I was always I was always like outgoing as an extrovert, but I definitely was not like the most confident person in the room. You know, I was really chubby growing up, and then I lost weight, and then but I always played sports and stuff like that. But I think the more time you become comfortable or confident, it really comes with how you perceive yourself and in that room you're going into. I mean, it doesn't, even right now, we're in New York, I don't live here, but if you say, hey, Richie, there's a networking event coming up in like a couple hours, you want to go? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go. I definitely would not walk in thinking like I own the place. That's rude. I mean, people say they do, but that's ridiculous. No one does. So it took a while, but ironically, the one thing that really changed my point of view and confidence in my ability to just basically focus on and keep in that zone was when, and I talk about in the book, I became a professional wrestler my senior year of college. Now, you're looking at me and, I mean, I don't look like a professional wrestler. And
I don't even know
I'm
what
pretty
a
sure the engineer back there
wrestler
would
is.
agree with you, and I get it. But the thing was, I loved it very much. I loved art and wrestling my whole life now, so I know they're very different things. I'll connect the dots. You're in entertainment, you get it, it's right. But, you know, it was something that no one ever thought I could do. It was something that I definitely didn't look the part. But I did it. I went, I tried out, I got trained, I got licensed. We wrestled for 10 years. One of my best friends was my tag team partner. And I realized that these are people that had no knowledge of me before. They didn't owe me anything. In fact, I'm working for them to book me on a show and you know, we're choreographing a match and so forth. And I realized if I could be really good in this area, and now people are believing in me, and now I got to go out and perform in front of people, strangers that are either going to boo me or cheer me or look for me in the parking lot. Like then you got to really have confidence, and that really brought out a much more a more bold version of myself. And then also with art too. I mean, really, when I was in college, I was an art major, and I was surrounding myself with other artists. I never had that before. You know, I went to regular high school and I took art classes, but no one that was like, I'm an artist and this is what I want to do. So you realize when you meet people that really sync with what you're doing, I find that built my confidence. Like, okay, I really belong here then. You know, this is something that I can definitely walk into this room and feel confident with.
Backing up to what you said earlier about, you know, writing and reading and also not being a big reader, at what point did you decide, okay, I want to write a book?
Yeah, so I've always, and it's funny, my mom used to always, she gave me a framed picture of my first book that I ever read, and it was a golden book and stuff like that. But I would always draw pictures when I was growing up. And even when I wasn't very good in school, like elementary school or middle school, the teachers knew that I was into art, and I would be able to use some projects that involved art rather than like, some of the written part. Like they were okay with that, not all the time. And then I liked speaking with people, and I was always like extroverted and could talk to everybody and that kind of thing. I've always wanted to write a book. I've always wanted to draw, and that was always my dream. I would go to the library, like you, and I would look through books, and I still remember covers that got me. I still remember things like that. But then again, I could not, how am I going to sit down and write a book when I can't even read one? And it took me a long time, but once I got more comfortable with it, and I would, when I wrote my first book, I would doodle images down. It was a children's picture book. Doodle images down. Back then I think we were just writing on a computer, but it was, I would write down ideas. And when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, that's when I really started to think about, okay, I can maybe make a book for her that my daughter would be proud of. And so that really tipped it off. Yeah. But I always wanted to do it, but I kind of kept it quiet because I was too afraid that, or again, it was a room that I wasn't supposed to be in yet.
The blog that you had, blog, website, whatever it was, were you making money off of it when it?
Oh, the podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
The Manners one.
Yeah. 100%.
And that was very fast off the bat, or?
Yeah, so with that, I mean, the way the economics of that works, I worked Macmillan Publishing and St. Martin's Press. They owned the podcast called quickanddirtytips.com. They still own it. Modern Manners Guy was a part of Quick and Dirty Tips. Okay. So I would get paid by them, and then I would get paid on ad revenue and things like that. Then the book came out, and I got paid separately for that. And then I would do speaking engagements, and then I would be able to wrap in, every time you write a book, I get to wrap in this book with that when I talk about it. So in the literary world, I mean, as much as we like hard copy books, unfortunately, there's not many bookstores.
It's so sad.
Yeah, so the realities is, and the only plus I will say to that is that it does force artists to be out there more often. I mean, singers, musicians have to tour more, they have to perform more, and authors have to really present themselves more. Before you could hide away and be this mystery, which I always thought was kind of weird, by the way. But you have to really have that presence, so it does force them because you have to present yourself to show, and they'll go online and buy it. So that was the big advantage, I think, towards some of the bookstores closing. If I'm trying to find a silver lining in that, which unfortunately it is. But so there's other avenues that you have to find. And I asked other writers. I mean, there were places that I showed up for like a talk, and there were people that were Newbery Awards and winners, and they were, they had TV shows on Disney, and they had a cartoon sold. And I'm like, what am I doing here? But you get to hear about how they run their business. What do they charge for talking fees? What do they charge for travel? How do you, incorporate yourself? Things like that. That part was fascinating to me. And I think that a lot of artists need to know that. When I was an art major, a lot of guys thought they were going to come to New York City, go outside on the street on Broadway, sell paintings, and become the next, Picasso. It's never going to happen. No offense, but I mean, for those that were trying. But there was no business acumen to understanding what do I need to do to really make the most of it. And now social media has obviously changed things around too. But
yeah. I started writing a book, and I got rejected by 2 publishing. I only sent it to 2, which I figured. And back a few years ago, I did an interview at BookCon. I presented to well-known authors, but in the influencer space. So they're not traditional author like you. They were, amassed a major amount of followers. Somebody probably wrote the book for them. And I find now in the world of publishing that unless you have X amount of followers, they're much faster to turn you down. So in comparison to when you wrote Reply All, I mean, how much has publishing changed?
Oh, I mean, I will say the rejection part, I still get rejected.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this, look, and this whole rejection thing, I mean, that to me is people act like they kind of just walked off into the world and everybody agreed. I mean, it was great. Everybody's got rejection. Like, look up J.K. Rowling, her story about Harry Potter. That's a fascinating story about rejection. But also, I mean, when I for Reply All, I was already working for Macmillan Publishing, but we had to sell the idea of the book to them. It was not a guarantee. There was 15 other hosts on the Quick and Dirty Tips podcast network that all wanted books. Some had some, don't get me wrong, and they had a lot more followers downloads than me. So I really had to sell myself to it, and they believed in me, and I felt, and I love it very much. I mean, it's a huge honor. But nowadays, you're right. I mean, these Insta celebrities that have the value in them is really just the followers they bring. From a publishing standpoint, it is, you look at it from the business side. It's like, okay, well, if I have Richie over here, and I love his book, but I have, John over here, and he's got 500,000 followers. If I get 1% of John's followers, I'm already making my money back. It's a hard thing. And then, by the way, I can tell John, I can be like, hey, look, by the way, we like your idea, but you know what? You're going to go meet with Mary, and she's going to go ahead and help you out with it. And next, Mary's writing the whole book. I've seen it happen 1,000 times. And I've seen people that have books that come out, and you realize that there is no way in the wildest dreams they wrote that book, ever.
Anyone in particular you can think of, like celebrity-wise?
Well, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, and I feel bad saying it. That would not be very proper. But I will say, like, you can look at certain things and it's one thing to write a book and then have somebody edit it for you. It's one thing to tell somebody your story. They write it, and now it's your book. Yeah. That's not you to writing a book. But I think that when it comes to people that you also have to look at some people's time schedules and what they really have and what their experience is. Have they really ever done anything in the arts and entertainment world aside from just posting stuff online? That doesn't give you
No.
So, and also, it's also about like their turnaround time too. I mean, your people are getting book advances and then they're turning it around and all of a sudden it's out of nowhere. So, you can kind of tell if you kind of look at the person, but I mean, I have good authority of situations where it was definitely not. It was a ghostwriter, which is fine. I mean, look, as long as the book entertains and it makes well, and that's all that matters. And if the person's okay with that, that's fine.
Did you write this whole book cover to cover?
100%.
No help?
I've never. Every single book I've written, I've written.
How do you
I have an editor. Don't get me wrong. I have somebody, because the only way a book will work out is there's no such thing as writing a book yourself and thinking it's going to hit. And I have an editor for Optimistics. I have an editor for my children's books. I had illustrations, and I would send it to people and say, hey, what do you think? And I trust the people I trust. For this book, I wrote every single word, but I had somebody, of course, look at it and say, okay, what if we do this? And then I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, great. And that's being open-minded to the creative, the creative concept and process. If you don't do that, I think you're just losing out. Like, nobody's first draft is the best of anything. So
what about, say, like Michelle and Barack Obama, right? Their books. I mean, people on that level, Mindy Kaling. Do you think that they wrote their books? I mean,
yeah, they wrote their books.
They wrote the books.
Yeah. Now, they have an editor, and the editor is like your best friend, because you're also saying, well, it's not so much like an editor comes in and says, okay, well, President Obama, I think we should make it that you went to school. You didn't teach at Harvard, you taught at UC Berkeley. It's like, well, I don't go there. But it makes much better. It's like, what? That stuff's different. That's falsehood. But then, so you're not gonna twist things around. But they say, well, when you say here, like we did this, what if we said it this way? Great. It's a good way, just another way to formulate a sentence and a paragraph and structure. That's fine. But I definitely think they did. And, a lot of comedians, definitely, I believe that they're putting their stuff behind their thoughts and things like that. You can see how they would really pour their hearts into it and what they would do. I think that, I think it's a fair guess to say some reality people maybe did not write their stuff. That's just my guess. I like to think that writing is very hard, and it takes a lot of time. And, so I think there's a lot more, you have to have a certain amount of like time and quality that goes into it.
How long did this take you?
That was about a year, year and a half, yeah. So it was some of it I had already points I touched on, but I mean, in every chapter is a different person that I speak to. Like, Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank is in there. Warby Parker and Maker's Mark, Avion Tequila. I mean, and I had to reach out to them.
I was gonna say, tell me about that.
So for this book, we had St. Martin's and Macmillan have a PR or people that have contacts, and I will say it works a lot better when the person from at Macmillan writes than at Gmail, which again, that's just the nature of. I mean, you're the same way. You probably open it up, but I will say though it was actually pretty easy, and the fact that we had a really good pitch letter of what we're trying to do. Let me just I interviewed them for like a half hour.
Phone calls or in person?
Phone calls. Mostly because everybody's all over the place, and it was hard to go in person. And at that time too, I don't even think we were like using like Zoom or stuff like that. Yeah, so everything was just over the phone, and then I'd record it and I'd let them know, and I'd let them review it, and so, but it took a while, and then you got to put it together. I mean, luckily I had a fantastic, editor also, and the team at Macmillan and St. Martin's are fantastic. So they really helped make it happen, and I drew cartoons in there, which I always like doing. And even those, I was like, here, I have an idea. Here's a guy at the airplane at the security check in an airline. What do you think? Like, okay, well, let's make it this. I'm like, or what if he said something about this instead? I'm like, oh, okay. Then I wrote the joke again. They're like, oh yeah, that hits. Yeah. Great. I like it.
One of my favorite passages, along with the Warby Parker guy, was from Krista Foley, the senior HR manager at Zappos. Now, I don't know if she's still at Zappos, but they have a whole thing where they give you $2,000 if you don't want to work at Zappos. And I'll read really quick the part that I enjoyed. And she said, when Tony first came to us with this idea, we thought everyone's going to take the offer, everyone's going to quit. But it hasn't been that way. The training is 4 weeks, and this offer happens on the second week. The original concept started because we didn't want people to stay here for the paycheck. Yeah. It's $2,000, and people are given the opportunity to think about it and see if they want to stay with us or go somewhere else. If working at Zappos is not something they're passionate about, we want to know that right away. Now, I know Zappos is obviously a massive company, right? But I think it's something that even if you're a startup, that it's nice, right? Those early days on any company, you want people who are really working with you and are in support of you. I've struggled with this as well for anyone that I've hired, as it's very obvious if someone doesn't want to, they're just in it for the money. Yeah.
Well, I think that, and it's one thing, like it was $2,000 back in 2012 on Interviewer, 2013 when it came out. So let's I know it's not inflation, isn't that much, but let's just $2,000 now is awesome. Yeah. If you're just starting out. Huge. And alone, if you get, don't like it from day one, they're going to give you $2,000 a bounce. You're like, it's even better. I was going to quit anyway. I think that I think that what they're doing is a very good idea, and other companies have done similar things. I want to say Zappos even upped it from then. And I know for a fact when they offered it too, it was less than that, and they're like, nobody took it, so they upped it again. But again, I don't know what the situation is now. I will say though that it's also unfair to think that some people are to look at their job as my life 24/7. I'm in it just like the CEO. And I think most CEOs probably get that, but keep that as it is. That doesn't mean you don't deserve to put it forward every time. And if you're, and like, I mean, you know, if I'm reporting to somebody, like I want to make sure they know I'm 100%, and I am. And if I need to bounce out for something for an emergency, or you know, I'm not feeling well, or something for the kids, you have to respect that too, and you know, you earn that respect and so forth. But I will say though that you know, some people are in it for the paycheck.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
But that doesn't mean that you're like, you get to just like punch the clock and punch out right away.
No, and I think entrepreneurship, and you can probably relate, is also so different. Like we cannot, because we don't work for anyone else, our mindset about that is different, right? Like even when I hate my job some days, I have to do the stuff I hate and not even get a paycheck, right? Like you're doing stuff sometimes all the time, and you don't necessarily get paid and then get to go home and just stop. So entrepreneurship is so different. One of the other parts I really liked about the book is tipping culture.
Yeah.
And I interviewed the founder of Bluestone Lane. I don't know if you know the coffee company a few weeks ago. And I asked Nick Stone, who's the founder, about tipping culture. Now, the other day I actually tweeted and I thought of you or I posted a video or something about it. And you say something about if it's, I think, less than $5 or $10 or something, that you should just let it go.
So there's different situations, but it's more like, and the tipping culture nowadays has gotten out of control. I did a Modern Manners Guy article about this in the fall, and I did a cartoon about it too, about where they have the flipboard now where you get to sit there. I mean, I went to Starbucks and I get a regular coffee. There's no craft that goes into it, you know. Just you got to pour it out and you got to put cream in it. That's just how it is. But there's still a tip thing, and I'm like, I don't understand. I don't believe in tipping when I have no choice. You have no choice but to give me this. Like you go to get takeout, I'm handing you the food, and now like how much tip is that really for you? Just literally handing it to me. And I also think that like a lot of this stuff happened with COVID. You know, when the delivery people and service people, which were like the heroes of that time to do stuff with, but simple operations don't necessarily deserve a tip. No. And it's almost like, and then people get like a little, and I think that it's also this, I mean, I always tip 20% wherever I go. And I think that, but if the service is not great, I don't think that you really deserve the person to deserve your time. And people are like, well, if you got a tip anyway, that shows them that, you know, how much better it could have been. Like, really could have been? Yeah. I mean, I'm paying this person because they were a complete jerk to me and everything was wrong, and now I'm late and it wasn't good and I'm paying overpriced for this. So that to me is very interesting. But I also think the pressure of tipping now, like every time I press no tip on coffee that costs the same amount, it's like, oh my God, this person like, now they're another person.
Are they gonna spit in my coffee?
Yeah, it's just like, and you know, it's that kind of thing. But then, you know, nowadays you see the one where they bring the credit card scanner over to you, and they wait at your table while you insert your card and you can type in your tip. That's the worst. Yeah. I want to put my card down, you take it, and I come back and I'll go do my thing. Yeah. This is we're done our transaction. I hate when they watch you.
Why?
Why do I hate it? It's awkward.
But for them or for you? Like
both.
Yeah.
Like it says you can the options are always going to be like 15, 20, 22 or other. So then person is basically saying like, here, how'd I do? Am I 20? Here, what are you writing there?
I know.
It's
like reviewing someone on a date or something.
Yeah, it's like I don't get more than 20.
I know.
Okay. So it to me is just super awkward, super uncomfortable, and I just think that it's like it just makes the whole interaction not as fun. Yeah. Especially if the person was bad. Yeah. Then they're watching you type in 10. So I don't know. It's just to me it's very uncomfortable, and I don't even like the screen where they flip it over. Yeah. That kind of stuff.
So funny because I agree with you, and I appreciate that you're not like, and I want to say this in the right way, right? Like obviously if you are working at Starbucks, like you're making a small amount of money in comparison to, I guess, an entrepreneur who can reach the ceiling, right? But does that also do I have to feel like I have to give you more money because you make less when also like I sometimes will have weeks where I make no money and I chose to be an entrepreneur. This equal to you choosing to work at Starbucks and actually you get a consistent paycheck and I don't.
Yeah.
You know, no one tips me for a speaking engagement or I'm not getting paid to sit here and spend an hour doing this, right? So it's an interesting kind of thing. But I really have no problem, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. A lot of times, anytime I go to dinner and something's wrong, or if my friend gets something, they always would be like, Alexa, I need you to say something. I am just the only person ever at the table who's fine to be like, hi, this was not good. I either want this taken off my bill, or I think it's fucking fun. Not in a way that like I want the free food, but like if something is wrong, I think everyone should know. I think I shouldn't pay for it. I think I should maybe get a gift card, but I will stop at like I shouldn't pay for it because you know, they're doing a service. I'm here to enjoy it. Yeah. And if it's wrong, I don't understand why someone would sit there and eat bad food. So is that bad manners?
No. But I think there is an etiquette in that too. Like I have a friend of mine who's one of my closest friends, and every time, and he's known for doing this a lot. And sometimes I'm like, dude, you gotta stop. Like, please don't. Just please, I want to come back here again. Please don't do that. And he's like, but it's this. And I'm like, he is right to a degree. Yeah. But I'm like, all right, but just let it fly. Now, my point is, I agree with you that yes, if I'm paying for, like, I had lunch over here, right? I had a salad. It was chicken, really good meal.
Just salad? Is that what you want? Or you sat down?
I sat down.
Okay.
It was a restaurant.
Okay.
I want to give him a shout, but I forgot the name. Parker and Quinn. Okay. Anyway, good salad. Anyway, got a salad. Really good salad. Had chicken on it. Good stuff. But if the chicken came out and it was raw, and I'm supposed to, or not cooked all the way, and they said, well, it still looks pretty good to me. And I'm like, but no, it doesn't look good at all. I need you to be cooked. And I would, of course, send it back. Yeah. If it came back like the chicken's cold and it's supposed to be hot, like that's not proper. I mean, like that's not me. That's not me being a jerk. And I think this is one of the biggest things that I tell people about when it comes to like manners and etiquette. Like people think that when I do like the manners and etiquette with Modern Manners guy that I'm a pushover or something like that because you're treating people a certain ways. It's not. I never got that from that. Well, and I'm glad, but it's almost like, you know, you can't do this or you can't do that. You have to like, no, like screw that. Like if somebody like you're paying $20 for a meal or whatever it is, and it comes out awful or not looking good, then you're like, why do I owe them the money when it was their fault? Just take it back and give me something new. Yeah. Now I'm not gonna make a scene and be like, hello everyone, this is awful, like a Larry David thing. But it is something where I think that it's perfectly fine to be like, look, this is not right. Yeah. You know? And however they reciprocate it is up to you.
So
it's up to them.
Yeah, because and since I moved to London, it's night and day difference there. Like I can't return things in London. I can't tell someone something's wrong with the meal. God forbid I go to Paris. They want to like completely cut my head off. You are never right as the customer. Yeah. But America is a very like customer driven place, which is so odd to me that they've made this tipping thing so like in your face because they almost want the customer to always be so happy, but they're making us so uncomfortable with these mechanisms they're going about giving people like the tip. So it's very, I don't know if you've spent much time in London, Europe, but it's
No,
just
I've
very
only been to
different.
London once. I love it. I've been years and years ago after college. I want to go back again. So, but it was, but no, I mean, I agree with you in that. There's definitely a culture divide wherever you go about tipping and service in general, you know, but and I think Americans are definitely more amped up and expecting a lot more, which I don't necessarily think is fair too. Like they're expecting crazy amount of service, this amount of this, but I don't. It really depends where you go. If I go to Chipotle, I'm really expecting a Chipotle level service. Get my stuff, put it there, and I'm done. Right? No flow.
Are you tipping at Chipotle?
No. No. I'm not. I don't tip. So the biggest conundrums we face with tipping is tip at takeout, tip at coffee, or tip at fast food. Like before the tipping. So and there's also a thing too. If you pay with cash, there is no tipping option. Only when you pay with card do they give you the receipt to tip. That's kind of weird. So if it's a really big thing, then why won't they ask you to tip when you give cash too? Not that it's like a way out, but it's still.
If you're at like a nail salon, I've been asked, hey, like we only take tips in cash.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that. So like my wife and daughter will go and they'll tip. But if you think back to like, take like a Chipotle, for example, before COVID or before this tipping screen flipped your way kind of thing, nobody tipped a takeout or I mean like a fast food place. Chipotle or like Chick-fil-A, for example. No one ever did that. Now it's an option. It's like, well, how did things change since the last time when I was doing it for years and years and years? Yeah. But so that to me is like you have no choice but to give me the food. And I hope I hope it's with a smile, and I hope that I hope that you enjoy the brief 8-second interaction we had together, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, but I think that when it comes to like you go to, a nice restaurant, they are written up in Yelp. They are, you go in, they expect, it's very neat, very like it's presented really well, and you're not getting what you expect. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal to me.
Yeah.
And there also is another regarding dining is how people split the check. This is a very big debate.
Yes, you talked about this in the
Yes.
book. Yep.
Not everybody agrees with me, but I don't believe in splitting the check evenly, as when people say they do. Like, I've been in situations where my meal is, let's say we went to dinner, okay? And we'll throw the engineer in as well, because you need more for this scenario too. So thanks, buddy. So he gets a lobster, right?
Yeah.
I got a burger, you get a salad.
Yeah.
At the end, he's like, all right, you're gonna split it up? You were split it, that's fine. You're like,
people do this.
I loathe when people,
Yeah.
and like, this is my biggest thing. And then you're like, wait a second, I don't know if it's not really even. It's like,
then
oh,
all of a
come on, just
sudden,
split it. And then he's gonna have an attitude when you're like, actually, no, mine was a little bit less. Fine. Like that to me is, the splitting the bill thing to me has gotten more mental fights in my brain about stuff. And also with drinking as well. I mean, when I go out, I very rarely will have something. I will have a drink, but not very often. My wife does not drink. So we go out with other couples, people like to drink, and I'll have at it. But I'm not, that bill comes, and your $8 glass of wine is wrapped in between my salad and, chicken or something. I'm not paying for your drink.
No.
Now, a couple bucks here and there, split it down the middle, totally fine. But
What's a couple bucks? Like 2, 5, 10?
I would think like $5 is probably good. I mean, but it's all a matter of like respect. Like if somebody says, like you should be able to acknowledge that your meal was more. So we go out and let's say we go to Starbucks, for example, right? I get a $3 tall pike and you get a $8 latte frappe, whatever. You're like, hey, let's split it up. I'm like, that's kind of weird. I mean, yours was literally twice as much as mine. But like that situation is not going to happen. And you acknowledge, like, no, wait. If I said, look, I will just split it. Like, no, come on. I spent way more than you. Please, come on.
Yeah.
So and you're acknowledging. Like, or if you go to a restaurant, somebody says, and they're like, well, look, I had 2 beers. Don't pay for the beers. I'll take care of this. And you're acknowledging it. But if it's like, mine was 20 and yours is 26 or something like that, and I'm like, we'll just split it down, and it's like, take care of me next time. Great.
I like
I'll
that.
buy you a drink next time.
Yep.
And that also sets up for the next meeting where you're going to see each other again too. And not that you're saying, hey, by the way, remember that time we're like $3 off? So remember, I get a coffee.
Okay, but there's people that for sure have probably said like, hey, do you remember that time?
Oh yeah, I that's a little tacky.
And then what do you think? Do you just in your mind you're like, oh, this person's a little tacky? Do you say?
Yeah, in my mind I think they're tacky, and then I wouldn't tell them they are. I would just be like, oh yeah, that's right, I'll get it for you. But again, I very rarely is it a situation where like I'm gonna make somebody split it with me because of my belief on this whole splitting thing. And then like I would never want that to be that person. And I'm shocked when people are that person and no one else finds, like I've been at a table with like dinner with people with like, 4 other couples or whatever. And then the drinks and the meals, and it comes to splitting it evenly, and I'm getting hosed on the bill. And I'm like, no one here thinks this is weird?
Yeah.
Like, then you're like, well, like, who's the asshole? Is it me for bringing it up or you for knowing it?
So much, yeah.
And so it just really changes the dynamic. But but I mean, it's almost like the person that actually says, hey, wait, by the way, no, I ordered this and this, so we're going to pay more. We're going to pay it extra. It's like they need a gold medal. That person is definitely a champion.
I've had some extremely more than 20 uncomfortable times throughout my 26 years so far. And in particular, I will say some of the worst times I've had are out with my friends who come from a lot of money, and it is going on their parents' credit cards.
Yeah.
And any of them who are listening to this, I mean, obviously they're I will say, like, for whatever reason, a lot of my friends have come from a lot of money, and I just did not grow up that way. And I'm very sensitive about, and I remember I feel less uncomfortable now and way more confident to be like, this is what I'm paying.
Yeah.
But I remember many things where it would just be split, or I would put, $150 on a credit card when I was 18, 19, because that's what they were all doing, and I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And now it's interesting because I find a lot of them are even more like sometimes even more sensitive because it's not their money if like their parents are paying. And I have just found the best thing to say is like, are you, and you say this in the book, like, this is what mine came to, I'm going to leave cash.
Yeah.
Or, I'll send you the exact amount and like divide it by, including the tip or whatever, just let me know how much I owe. And I think the more I've realized if I just say a similar sentence, I've become more confident instead of just being like, okay, this is too awkward, I'm not going to say it.
And look, and that's just it. I mean, think about the thing where I'm so like staunch on this stance is that it's like, at the end of the day, who's the jerk in the situation? Is it you for saying I really should only have to pay for what I got plus the tip, things like that? Or is it and then you're speaking up and the person that's saying, you know what, I know that person got a lot less, but it's just easier to do it this way.
I think you know the answer to that question.
Well, of course, but then you think about it and you're like, well, then that's on them.
Yeah.
And wealth is a situation. Wealth is always sticky. Coming from having expense account or having something where you can parent expense account, where it may be, that you're allowed to do stuff is different. But in the same sense, if somebody has that, then that's on them to really be more respectful to about like, look, I can afford it. I know you're already working hard and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but I make it known.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, mine was this. And I just do it first.
You say also to bring cash with you, and my dad's actually, ever since I was little, he's always said he always has cash.
Yeah.
For safety reasons, I think, especially like for me being, a young woman, but I think in general you avoid a lot of these awkward things.
Yeah.
You're at dinner and Venmo and Zelle, and God forbid the other person doesn't have it, and now they don't have cash, and now they're like, well, there's no ATM. What do you want me to do? And then I'll be like, what am I? And I think 100%, and I think when you talk about it out loud and you say it, you really realize the other person's a jerk. But I think to ever expect anyone to pay for you and you don't know their financial position, and even if you do, is just a whole level of asshole.
Yeah.
Like, there is no reason that should even be a thing.
Yeah, and and you're right. And I think that, and I've been around, you're around people with wealth and, you see people in business or just friends and stuff like that. And, they like to show off a little bit when they're like, give me the sushi boat. I'll take the sushi boat. It's like, what? That's like sushi for 10 people, but okay. There's a little bit of like that arrogance level, I think, that comes with it. They like to show off too. But, it's never easy to assume somebody has something just because, they're dressed nice or they have a job. You don't know what people's lives are behind closed doors. That's across the board. But, I just would never want somebody to think like, dude, that guy made me, he made me split, the lobster and I got a burger. Are you kidding me?
There's also, there's no reason to, and I remember half the times that something like that has even happened. Does anyone ever really remember that dinner? Like, you know what I mean? So if you can go into with that mindset, like, are you thinking 5 years later, that time I had that great one bite of it and I paid for the whole thing? No. So that's why it's like, why do you feel so uncomfortable saying something we're probably not going to remember you eat it?
I also don't want to be around that person anymore. And like, I've been in situations where I've gone out with people on different occasions and I brought up I'm going to pay for this. I didn't have a drink, so I'm going to do this. And like, they kind of like roll their eyes a little bit, like almost like I'm being cheap or something. And then like next time we would go out or a time later and they would say, well, Richie didn't have anything to drink tonight, so we're not going to, let's just make sure we pay more. I'm like, yes. Like, am I the asshole here? Like, that is all 100% you, man. Mm-hmm. Like, and I just have no problem standing up for myself. And when I was younger, I definitely got taken advantage of.
Yeah, me too.
But it comes with just more confidence and being okay with it. But I just think like that would never, like the audacity to make it my fault because I got to pay for you. And usually the people that do that think they have a lot of money or say they have a lot of money. And then now they're being really cheap with it for the sake of like, So it does come back. I remember when somebody makes me do it. I gotta like jump ahead of it.
And if you run a startup or you want to pursue something, different like I've done, you have the best reason because no one can be mad that you're doing something different with your life, So if you ever in that position, that's what if I ever just don't want to pay for something or I don't want to go to a dinner or something, I'm just like, I run a startup. I'm really sorry, but everything right now goes into the business and I just can't afford to go to dinner. Yeah. I'm probably going to take myself out to dinner and spend it more than I would have spent with this person. But like, that is your way out.
But I love when I'm able to take somebody out to dinner and pay for them. I've had interns in the past that I still I still have relationships of friends with them, and we hang out or we'll text and stuff like that, and we meet up for a meal or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, don't worry, I got this. And they don't have to, but it was like they don't necessarily have to, but I like to. And if I take out like a relative or something like that, I like to pay. And my parents did it for me, and they still like to do it when we take my family out. If my kids have invite a friend out for the day and we go out and we stop off for a lunch, I'm definitely not expecting them to pay. But still, it's like, look, no problem, I got this. I'm not expecting the parent to pay me back.
No.
So I really do enjoy that part of it. But I think it's also like I'm not dropping $50 a day on meals for random fun.
No, and I think you have such a good, and that's why I love this book, head on your shoulders about this. And your kids are very lucky that you're like this, because again, no one taught me this stuff. But I'm very similar to you. I mean, I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm either buying someone who's younger than me the meal or the coffee, or just even a girl yesterday who was. I judged a startup competition last year, and she texted me and was like, "I'm really nervous. You judged it last year, and it's so good." I Venmoed her $20. I didn't even know it was her username. I went on Instagram and linked it to the logo and it was like, just buy yourself a pre
That's awesome.
thing. Yeah, and to me, I take a lot of pride in that, because I think at the end of the day, and it doesn't seem like you grew up with tons of money.
No.
So you've really self-made. That is the simplest way, right, to show somebody that you care, is money. Buying your parents or the kid something, because it's a gift, not necessarily even hard cash, but an experience, a coffee. You can do it.
Yeah, it's not like you're giving the person here's $20, by the way.
No,
thanks. It's like you'd rather here's a give them a gift card. And if you go to coffee and they insist on treating you, and you feel again, you like you said, email them a gift card to Starbucks for $5, $10. I mean, little stuff and it really a $5, $10 gift card, or treat yourself to something. That means a lot. Yep. It really does. I mean, this happened to me maybe 2-3 weeks ago. When I go to this coffee shop all the time, and I went to go up to it. I went to go pay, and the person said, "No, this one's on us. All right, this one's already paid for." And I was like, "Oh." Well, I was like, and I know I come here a lot, but I don't get free stuff. It's like, no, the person before you said to pay for the next person's thing.
That's sweet.
And I was like, it was $4, but I'm like, that was, so I did it for this person, next person. I gave my 10. I said, look, I mean, now I don't know how long the train went on after that, but when they weren't expecting it, but that to me was just what the person did. For $3 to $4, they treated my coffee, and I was like, that is so awesome. Yeah. That really is a cool thing to do. Yeah. So
I think in this day and age with social media and whatnot, we've lost so much of humanity. And the way that I can Venmo her $20, I don't even have to go to the store. Maybe she bought herself went towards a new pair of shoes. Hopefully it bought her coffee or something to make her feel more confident when she was standing up on stage. But we lack the emotional, people to people skills now because of the internet. And you don't necessarily talk specifically about that in the book, but I like that you have traditional forms of interaction and manners. What do you think about handwritten cards?
Oh yeah. First of all, the face-to-face stuff is
huge.
It's huge. And it's funny. I remember years and years ago, I was working for a company, and I had a junior that worked for me. And he was not my assistant, but I was a senior, he was a junior and worked with me. And we became very, very good friends. And we were 14, 15 years apart in age. We became very good friends. And he made a good point. He says, my generation was the last one before we all only had cell phones. Yeah. He goes, I got one later when I was in college, or in the end of high school. But the generation where it's just mobile, it is killing interaction. I mean, and I have teen kids, and my kids are fantastic. And if I tell them to turn it off, they turn it off. There's really no they're really cool with it. But that's how they communicate. And when you see people interact and talk, I was just and who are young or just younger than you, and you think that you're not expecting it, it blows your mind. When I was interviewing for my other book, The Optimistics, I was interviewing this woman's daughter about her father, and she's 15 years old. And I have a 15-year-old. My 15-year-old, and my daughter is fantastic. She's super smart, super athletic, very sweet. But when I interviewed this other girl, we were interviewing Zoom, she's looking like this, face forward. She didn't look off. She didn't play with her hair. She was talking so eloquently. And I'm like, you're 15? Yeah. I was like, good Lord, you sound like you're 30. Yeah. But It is, and you see this in your work too. Like if you have somebody you're going to put in front of someone else, and they're sitting there fumbling over everything, their words, their appearance, their delivery, or they're distracted by their phone. Like that's it. I mean, people get jobs based upon how they present themselves. It's like, hey, look, I mean, they may not be the best, but I can work better with them.
Yep.
And they're going to make other people more comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think that to me is just the whole texting thing is just, and the everything on the phone has killed human interaction.
Yeah, and it's very sad because, and I mean, you have teenagers, right? So it's just so different than how you and I were. I mean, look, when I was 12 years old and 13 and writing and trying to cold email people and get that internship, I mean, I was not grammatically correct and whatnot, but at least I was doing it. I would never have the way that I've seen some people talk to me or that I've hired, that I've let go. I think there's a major lack of disrespect. And I think because it's so easy to just be like, hey, yo, what's up? Like, what do you cannot act like that in a professional setting. It is incredibly inappropriate.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that you see that too much is casualness about it as well. And it is, I mean, to text your boss sup when you don't really are not even like kidding around or even remotely friends, or the U is just a letter U instead of Y. I mean, little stuff like that. But it's also like with texting too, I'll get texts from people and it's like, line. Like text rather than just one text with a sentence. Yeah. But now, I mean, and nowadays with like things like Grammarly and Canva and all this, there is no reason.
There's no excuse.
Why you, and look, I've texted things or emailed things really quickly, not thinking about it, and I've messed up. Now I do, and it might be somebody I'm closer with, but there is no reason not to formulate something and take 5 seconds. And I'm guilty of it. I had to learn it. I mean, I had to go back and do it because I've messed up before. But even like reply all. I mean, we titled the book Reply All and Other Ways to Tank Your Career. Reply all because that became like the corporate way of putting your foot in your mouth. Like like when you hit reply all and you're like, like your breath is like taken away. And when the book came out, I got inundated, and I loved, by the way, with awful stories of reply all situations. And each one was worse than the next. Yeah. And levels of people. Like it wasn't just like, fresh out of college, it was like senior level. And it was just awful. And when I say awful, I mean hilarious. So, and it was, I was just like, this really is what that, in the corporate world, that's like putting your foot in your mouth, hitting reply all. But that whole part to me is just a very lost art. And when you do see it happen, you're like, okay, no, this person really gets it. This is good.
And it's cool. You mentioned earlier about authors, and a lot of them kind of end up behind the scenes. And I find that too. I mean, even if you look at Candace Bushnell, who wrote Sex and the City, and Cecily Simpson, I think, from Gossip Girl. I mean, I have no idea where these people. I actually randomly the other day went down a rabbit hole and Googled Candace Bushnell lives in Brooklyn. She's still writing books. Yeah. She never does interviews. But you have the podcast and whatnot, that media background. And I find a lot of young people reach out to me asking for internships or jobs and whatnot. And I think a lot of them, in a way that's so different than an author who's like behind the scenes, because I've got the personal brand, you almost feel like you know me by what I post online. And so I find sometimes I struggle with, I'll try and train someone. And the way that like people gave me a chance when I was younger, I want to give that to like those other people who are writing the emails and cold calling. But, at the end of the day, you're running a company. So you can't speak to me in the way that perhaps you've seen me like post about on the internet. You know what I mean? In that way, at the end of the day, like I'm still your boss, even if we're similar in age. Yeah. And that's where I find a lot of these young people, they think that like because of the social media that you know me, or you can act the way that I casually act when I'm posting an Instagram story. And it is so different. It's a job.
Yeah, well, and I mean, for me, it's a little bit different in that aspect, because when you're in the arts, again, I mean, this goes back to like the old idea where, musicians and artists and painters and writers are like these like tortured souls where, it's, you can't help but do this. It's like, stop. Like everybody who's been in the entertainment industry, art, writing, music, sat in front of your mirror, sang your brains out, looked at your piece, thought, how great would this be in a museum? How great this be like you did. Yeah. So you don't get cool credits for them. That era is done with. Now, of course, if you reach a certain level, you're not out there like, hey, by the way, I got a new book. That's okay. I mean, I understand it like that. But, I think that you owe to people that are investing their money into your book, art, music, podcast, whatever it is, that certain level of presence to them. And when I was doing children's picture books, I was doing readings in front of children. Now, they're the hardest audience because if they don't like it, they're up and out. And I remember when my first children's book came out, my best friend was one of my tag team partners in wrestling. I said, hey man, look, I'm gonna do the book reading. I said, I think I want to do like a puppet. And I said, can you do the puppet? I'll narrate it and we'll like go back and forth. He's like, yeah, hey, no problem. And he'll say yes to anything, which is great. That's what good friends do. But we've never done a puppet show before. I didn't have to do that. And he's never done a puppet show before. And we maybe practiced in the parking lot. And I had like a little booth set up and he was there with the puppet. I got a puppet made for a turtle, which was the character. But I didn't have to do that. No. And then there was a lot of times when we brought the puppet show to places for charity or just to other areas, and we weren't even getting paid. But that's part of your brand, and that's what you have to put forward too. I mean, and the branding of what you're pushing out, I think you owe it to the audience to say, here's the person behind that, and this is the way to get to know you better, or just as a way to add to the work. Again, that's why you want to see people play live for music.
What's the most common mistake you see young professionals make when they're looking to get a job?
I will say that one is about the resume is a big deal too. Again, with websites like Canva, your resume should be like perfect. It's already done for you. Like I was used to do graphic design, so that would take me like the stuff that Canva does would take me hours. But so I think like just the formatting and that. I think that people they may not know the industry too well, and you can just look it up. Like everything is at your fingertips. Yeah, you can know the CEO, the head of this, how they dress, how they act, what they've done. Like look up stuff and be interested. I think that's a big thing too. They think they're just looking to get a job, and they're looking to. And I'm not saying everybody loves their jobs. That's not what I'm trying to say. But you should know what you're getting into and the people you're getting into. I think that's a big part about it. And then also it really comes to like the presentation of it, like dressing for the part. Yep. Don't walk out now with the keychain with the lanyard of your college lacrosse team hanging down, and get your pants tapered. So like stuff like that, little little stuff like that. And I'm being picky on those kinds of things, but it's okay to present yourself like you already got the job or like you're going to fit in.
Hell yeah, of course.
But you'd be surprised. People are, they don't want to do that. And, and then they try to go back into their old ways of like, and I also think that it's like, I call it like vocal fry, but you see them like bros talk like this a lot, or they'll talk like a bro, or like some girls will talk like, and it's like this like bro, like, and like that voice of like, it's this voice you put on. And like I listen to Howard Stern, he talks about it all the time too, but it's like this like, yeah, really? Yeah, man, like, bro, totally. I'm like, who are you talking about? Like no one wants that. And I see people do it. I'm like, and I've been in situations where I was working with somebody and they were really young and they were saying like, bro, or like their voice, the way they were doing it. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Like we can talk like this if you want, but not in front of that person.
No.
So it happens all the time. And I don't like, that's over.
Yeah.
That part of your world is over when you're in the doors. To me, I think that's something that's kind of lost as well.
Yeah, and a lot of that could also be because of social media, right? We don't know where people are figuring out. Again, like the manners, the etiquettes. I'm glad I grew up and had the blog and like built my own brand because I've had to self-teach myself all of this stuff. And now I'm able to look at other experiences and other people and be like, oh God, they're really screwing that up. But like, what do you even say, right? They have to learn on their own. I had to learn on my own.
Yeah, and that, like if somebody's not willing to like take a lesson from you and like listen to you, that's just on them. They're never going to. But I think that it's also like if somebody says like if you deliver news to somebody, advice, and that's a little bit more in a more empathetic manner, and like you're like, look, don't take this wrong way. I love you. You're awesome, but I need you to do X, Y, and Z. They're like, okay, cool, and they should be cool with it. Like you should be able to take advice. When I was an artist, you had to critique paintings in college, and people were like, no, that's this, that's not, and you're like, you had to take it, and no harm, no foul. Like we're all friends. We're friends or knew each other, and classmates, and that just comes with the embracing critique. And I mean, to this day, if somebody, I would rather beg somebody to tell me if I was doing something wrong or they don't like something I'm doing than me assume and not know.
A young woman who works for me, I mean, she's 17. She's been working for me for years. And every time she makes an error, the first thing she does is, I'm so sorry, it won't happen again. And it's so great. It is so great. And I very rarely have ever, like, sometimes I will get super annoyed with my assistant if she fucks up and I like go off on her. And she's like, well, you didn't tell me. And I'm like, I don't fucking care. Like, just apologize. But you know what I mean? Like, and sometimes I think people have to realize that, like, if you're working for someone, sometimes you just have to shut up. I mean, I've consulted for people, and a lot of times I find myself like, I didn't do this. Like, the best thing to do is shut up. And sometimes you just say, it won't happen again. But I think also, if you really didn't make the error, you can say, like, you know, I'm really sorry this happened. I actually didn't do that, but I will make sure in the future this doesn't happen again.
So when I was training to become a professional wrestler, the world of pro wrestling, I know I'm kind of this, I trust me, I'm bringing it back, I promise.
Okay.
But, you know, you have to learn that world and that culture, right? And I mean, there's a respect factor. And yes, it's choreographed and people know the ending, stuff like that. Don't want to burst your bubble, but it still hurts, but it's not, it's choreographed. But anyway, but there is a respect factor, right? And when you become a champion, you know, you're becoming a champion as like to represent the company or do something like this. You're really not beating the person, right? It's the person allowed you to help do that. So my trainer taught us a saying. It said, the ass you kick on the way up is the ass you kiss on the way down. And what that means is that if you treat people like shit getting to the top, I guarantee you when it's your turn, when they're walking their way up too, they're gonna remember that. And I'll tell you right now, like the boss that I had in the beginning of the book, who was a disaster to me, and I'll never mention his name or the company, stuff like that, but I mean, he knows who he is. He was just not a nice person, period. And he made everybody in the office uncomfortable. I ran into him 15 years after I worked for him at a restaurant. This was maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I didn't see him in forever. And there he was, and said hi, real quick, walked away, that was it. And like, I don't even think he even recognized me at first. I mean, I looked back the same, but I mean, like, it was just a weird, like, he was surprised to see me, like, kind of out of place. But like, you know, I'm not gonna like rub in his, I mean, like, I'm much better person than I was with him, and life is better. I've had I've had, you know, people in business that we just don't see eye to eye, and you can break things evenly, and then it's just a matter of how, like, do they treat you later on. Like, you easily be, whether you're friends or not, go your own way, but you always remember the people that did you wrong. It's sad. You do. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. And I think that when you look at that too, it's about, you know, can you brush things off, or how are you going to treat people like that when you're on the way up versus when you're coming down? Because you're probably going to need help either way.
Richie, you have been such a blast to talk to.
Thank you.
What makes you fearless?
What makes me fearless? Well, when I was a wrestler, when you watch a 300 guy stand on your throat for 10 minutes, you learn how to be fearless. But no, I honestly kind of call myself a professional trier. I mean, I really am just. I learned very on that my road to whatever I wanted wasn't paved, and definitely wasn't. Nobody was lying it out for me, and art and books and things like this really kind of helped me do that. But I just really believe in honestly giving it a try. The what ifs of the world really don't affect me anymore. I don't care how many times people, if everybody's laughed at me about things I wanted to try, and then they call me up and ask for my help. So it's, those kinds of things start to get, after a while, you realize that, okay, if I want to be in this room, as you mentioned before, what's going to take for me to get in this room? And when I wrote The Optimistics, there was a gentleman in the book who is, has Alzheimer's, and he knows that his time is cut, and he told me that, he goes, Richie, time is important. And I was like, and it just hit so hard. I mean, here's a man that's looking at an incurable disease, but now I'm also looking at it where it's how do you relate that term to everything else, and how much time you really had to devote yourself to stuff. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Thank you for coming on the show. Where can everyone find you on social media? Buy the books. You have 8 books?
8 books. So
Wild.
This is my next book coming out, The Optimistics. It's a memoir. I spent almost 2 years there were 3 gentlemen I met, and they have young onset dementia, which is all dementia before age 65. So most people think it's like your grandparents or older people. And these are people that in their 50s had to quit their jobs, their spouses are taking on, and they, rather than face that within the darkness of it, they call themselves the Optimistics. And I'm like, oh, that's such a cool name.
Nice, yeah.
So I reached out to them and I said, look, I love your story. I just want to, and I thought I'd be writing just about them, but I ended up meeting dozens and dozens of people across the country, even El Salvador and Israel as well. And you're meeting people that went through the same thing they are, and how are they looking at optimism? And I need help with that all the time. You know, I'm not rainbows and sunshine all day long. Nobody is. But I do think that how do you face optimism in everyday life, relationships, family, work, career, anything. So The Optimist comes out May 28th. I'll send you a copy. All my books can be found on my Amazon page. My website is richiefreeman.com, and then all my socials is at Richie Frieman.
Thank you so much. I will link all of his books and everything in the show notes. And if you want to write a review for the podcast, you can go to the Apple Store podcast or on Spotify, The New Unfiltered. And I will see you guys next week for a new episode of the show.